A maid informs the young lady that her cousin Iris has arrived, prompting a delighted response. She happily runs down the stairs to welcome her cousin, thrilled to see her. However, she loses her footing and takes a dangerous face-first dive down the steps. At that exact moment, as she lies sprawled on the floor, everything suddenly stops. The shock of the fall triggers something unexpected, and she suddenly remembers her entire past life. Armed with modern weaponry, she resolves to completely crush any tragic fate with sheer firepower. In her previous life, she was a first-year college student who loved living alone and indulging her military otaku hobbies. She spent her days happily examining and maintaining her beloved collection of model firearms, but that gun-loving girl's peaceful life was about to take a bizarre turn. Before she knew it, she had somehow been reborn as a tiny 4-year-old girl. Astrid throws a frantic tantrum in front of the mirror, completely baffled by her sudden transformation. Yet as she calms down, she realizes she instinctively knows her new identity. She is now Astrid Sophie von Oldenburg, a notorious villainess from an Otome game she once played. Since she had cleared every route of that game in her past life, she remembers all of its details. This realization makes her scream in horror, knowing she is not the protagonist. Now living in the Prussian Empire, she must prepare herself before eventually entering the Magic Academy. She harshly warns the lowborn girl to stay away from the prince, though the girl only finds her cat mask cute. Suddenly, the cat-masked girl is startled by a sudden confrontation. Meanwhile, strange cat-masked figures stand around in the background. When the villainess demands to know who they are, a handsome prince dramatically reveals himself. He immediately accuses her of all the terrible things she has done to the heroine, though she is distracted by silly thoughts. Consequently, the prince sentences her family to ruin and condemns her to exile. She understands completely that her role in this world is merely the villainess destined to get in the protagonist's way. While the main characters enjoy their happy endings, she is left to suffer a miserable fate in every single route. Any normal person would think their life is completely over after realizing such a grim future. She slumps to the ground in despair, staring at her bound hands. However, her personal motto has always been to stay positive no matter what. Since this is a fantasy world of swords and magic, she sees a way out. She resolves to polish her magic talent to overturn her bad ends, remembering she has the potential to be a rival. With newfound determination, she strikes a confident pose. To achieve her goal, she plans to utilize the extensive knowledge from her previous life. In her past life, she spent her time practicing at a shooting range. Because of her military obsession, she possesses a deep knowledge of modern weaponry that she hopes to weaponize. Meanwhile, a group of adventurers confronts a menacing pig-like monster holding a wooden club. The beast stands tall and glares fiercely, ready to strike down anyone in its path. Seeing the danger, a young witch with a pointed hat prepares herself for the impending clash. Observing this, Astrid realizes that as far as she knows, no modern weaponry or equivalent magic exists in this fantasy world. Determined to change things, she resolves to quickly awaken her magical talent and fuse it with her beloved modern military technology. With a fierce expression, she vows to use this power to completely crush the bad end that awaits her. To finalize her plan, she holds an internal meeting in her mind, where all versions of herself unanimously approve the new strategy. Following that mental consensus, the 4-year-old girl firmly establishes her new life policy. Her first rule is to never neglect her daily training so she can fully awaken her magical talent. Secondly, she must succeed in fusing the magic of this world with modern military technology. Her third guideline is to actively avoid any situation that might lead her toward a bad ending. Finally, she plans to acquire enough skills and savings to survive even if her family house is ruined. Confident in her thorough preparation, she pumps her fists and feels completely ready for the future. However, immediately after making these grand plans, she collapses with a severe fever that keeps her bedridden for 7 days. Outside her family's grand mansion, the days pass quietly while she recovers from her sudden illness. Inside her spacious bedroom, she finally rests peacefully in her large bed as the fever begins to break. Suddenly, her eyes snap open with renewed energy and determination. Jumping out of bed, she joyfully declares that she is different from the original Astrid and will never accept a bad ending. Eager to get started, she announces that her special magic training begins this very day. But as she rushes forward, she trips on her long nightgown and tumbles onto the floor. Rubbing her head, she wonders if a child's body is simply designed to fall over easily. Just then, Astrid's father enters the room and calmly explains that magic training only begins after entering the academy. Hearing this shocking news, she stands frozen in disbelief at the massive delay to her plans. Devastated by the revelation, she collapses to the floor and cries out that waiting until then will be far too late. Although she had everything she could want, Astrid lamented that she was still fated for absolute ruin. Now 4 years old, she threw a tantrum and resolved to learn magic to blow away her tragic destiny. To achieve this, she set off to find her father, Paul Hans von Oldenburg, the head of the ducal house. Determined to survive, the young girl prepared to begin her battle for survival through intense study. Entering his study, Astrid politely called out to her father to make a special request. Although he was a high-ranking noble serving as minister of posts, she was confident her cute smile would easily win him over. With a mischievous grin, she prepared to unleash her ultimate charm offensive. Clasping her hands together, she beamed at him with a dazzling, angelic expression. She begged to study magic, but her father gently reminded her that she should wait until entering the academy. He added that she had more important things to focus on first, such as learning proper manners. Her father's firm rejection left her temporarily speechless. Realizing her angelic smile had failed, she refused to let this minor setback stop her. Determined to try another approach, she called out to him once more. She confidently held up 3 fingers, claiming there were 3 major benefits to her studying magic early. For her first point, She argued that having perfect manners but terrible grades would be deeply embarrassing. Her father stroked his chin, forced to admit that her logic made perfect sense. She then enthusiastically explained that entering the academy with advanced knowledge would guarantee her status as a top student. She explains that such achievements would also make her a topic of admiration among the other guardians. She adds that this would earn her respect from other noble children, ultimately boosting his reputation at court. Touched by her apparent thoughtfulness, her father realizes she is considering his standing as well. Behind her innocent facade, she deviously notes that she only needs one final push to convince him. She then reminds him of another crucial point, her undeniable natural aptitude for magic. Her father agrees, recalling the magic measurement test conducted right after her birth. In a flashback, a priest congratulates the Duke on the birth of his daughter. The Duke immediately requests a magic measurement, which the priest readily agrees to perform. The priest prepares to assess the newborn baby's magical capacity. Upon testing her, the priest is utterly shocked by the unprecedented magnitude of her magical power. Another observer exclaims that with proper training, she could easily become a grand mage. Back in the present, Astrid argues that her immense power could even save the country during a crisis. However, she quickly catches herself before letting her true dangerous thoughts slip. She nearly mentions using fléchette rounds to tear enemies apart, but quickly pivots to suggesting she could heal the royal family to bring fame to their house. She nervously sweats, hoping her slip of the tongue went unnoticed. When her father mentions hearing something incredibly disturbing, she quickly dismisses it and summarizes her 3 main points. Convinced by her arguments, her father finally gives his consent. He agrees to let her study magic, but only once a specialized tutor arrives, prompting a joyful embrace from his daughter. Soon after, her new magic tutor, Wolf von Wrangel, arrives and introduces himself. The two sit down together at a table to begin her very first magic lesson. Wolf asks if she knows the 2 types of magic, and Astrid confidently identifies them as elemental and blood magic. He confirms her answer, explaining that elemental magic relies on borrowing the power of the 4 elemental spirits. He then begins the lesson by demonstrating water elemental magic. She watches him closely, her expression showing a hint of curiosity. As he easily summons water into a teacup, she finds the display rather plain and asks if water spirits are limited to only producing water. He explains that they can summon almost any liquid, even mentioning a colleague who developed a flammable black water, which immediately makes Astrid realize he is talking about petroleum, and fills her with a burning desire to acquire it. Moving on to the next subject, Wolf introduces the concept of blood magic. He explains that this particular magic does not rely on the power of spirits. Instead, it directly affects the human body and can even manipulate an opponent's mind, prompting Astrid to realize it interferes with the brain, as Wolf notes its power can both heal and harm. A dark silhouette represents the mysterious and potent nature of this magic. Astrid then asks if blood magic can be used to boost physical capabilities, and Wolf confirms that knights and adventurers frequently use it for exactly that purpose. While Astrid notes that everyone seems to have the same idea, Wolf cautions that blood magic still holds many mysteries, advising that they start with the well-understood elemental magic first. She readily agrees, knowing that mastering elemental magic is the crucial first step to recreating modern weaponry. Leading her outdoors, Wolf instructs her to begin by calling upon the water spirits by strongly visualizing drinking water or a pond. Astrid privately muses on how surprisingly vague and abstract magic seems to be. Still, she closes her eyes and begins focusing her thoughts on the concept of water. With deep concentration, she prepares to cast her very first spell. Astrid attempts her very first magic after being reincarnated into another world, but her tutor Senjin suddenly calls out for her to stop, declaring that is quite enough. Before them, a massive sphere of water hovers in the air as she looks on in surprise. Panicking, she asks Wolf how to make it disappear, and he instructs her to stop imagining water and visualize nothingness instead. As she squeezes her eyes shut, she struggles to clear her mind and control the floating magic. Once the water is gone, she marvels at how magic is actually used in this world. Her tutor, Senjin, explains that normally it takes a long time just to produce water, praising her exceptional talent and rapid progress. Although she politely thanks him, she secretly laments that this basic magic won't help her recreate modern weaponry. He then suggests they try calling upon the fire spirits next. She eagerly agrees, ready for the next challenge. Focusing her mind, she softly chants to summon the flames. Suddenly, a massive violent pillar of fire erupts all around her. Terrified by the sheer scale of the blaze, Senjin screams for her to stop as the overwhelming heat surges. After the flames subside, he admits he never expected her to produce such power on her first day, noting it usually takes years of training. Trying to compose himself, he suggests they move on to the wind spirits next. She complies, focusing her mind once more on the concept of wind. In her mind, she visualizes advanced military aircraft like fighter jets and helicopters to represent the element. However, instead of a mighty gale, only a tiny cute cloud appears and blows a gentle puff of air. Despite the underwhelming result, Senjin praises her for successfully mastering 3 elements. She, however, is disappointed, pointing out that the wind lacked the incredible power of her previous spell. While she expected a massive storm, he explains that controlling magic depends heavily on what one imagines and the scale of their power. He then promises they will cover proper control methods in detail tomorrow. Thinking about this, she contemplated how to summon modern weapons, realizing a simple storm wouldn't be enough to blow away missiles or fighter jets. Her teacher then introduced the final test with the Earth Spirit, confident that summoning simple soil would be easy for her. He then instructed her to try shaping it into some form. Astrid eagerly agreed, reasoning that if water spirits could produce petroleum, then earth spirits should be able to create steel. She closed her eyes and focused her immense magical power to begin the transmutation. Suddenly, a massive blast of energy erupted as a solid object began to materialize from the ground. Astrid cheered in triumph as she successfully created a fully functional pump-action shotgun. She grinned wickedly, feeling one step closer to achieving her grand military ambitions. Having generated a versatile weapon useful for everything from riot control to breaching locks, she was suddenly interrupted by a small dwarf-like figure who introduced himself as the gnome who helped her. The spirit addressed her directly, leaving Astrid completely startled and wondering who he was. Wolf von Wrangel marveled at the sight, noting how extremely rare it was for a spirit to show its physical form. He wondered aloud if this manifestation was somehow related to the strange object Astrid had just created. Astrid panicked internally, fearing that her secret plan to recreate modern weaponry had been exposed, and that this spirit had come to eliminate her to preserve the world's order. However, the gnome simply explained that he could easily tell what the tool was meant to do by looking at its structure, but criticized her for trying to make him build something so incomplete. He proudly declared that he had refined it into a perfect, complete form, telling her she should be grateful. Realizing that relying solely on her memories made it impossible to create a perfect weapon, Astrid accepted his help and eagerly announced she planned to make many more of these in the future. When she asked him to help correct her designs each time, the gnome suspiciously asked if she was planning to start a war. She playfully winked and replied that it was something quite similar. When Wolf von Wrangel asked what kind of tool it actually was, she innocently claimed it was just a device for opening doors or punishing bad people. She justified her lie to herself, though she secretly had no intention of being satisfied with just non-lethal ammunition. With that, Wolf von Wrangel concluded the day's lesson, and that night Astrid happily went to sleep while hugging her very first modern firearm. However, her joy was short-lived as her father later sent a formal complaint to her tutor, leaving Astrid to offer a silent apology to her teacher. The tutor, Senjing, explained that magic talismans could cast memorized spells without needing imagination, though they were single-use items that burned up after activation. Astrid imagined a chaotic scene before battle where senior mages would demand their juniors mass-produce talismans on the fly. Seeing her interest, Senjin suggested they actually try making a magic talisman themselves. He explained that the material for the magic talisman was paper mixed with a maiden's hair. He then instructed her to hold the paper and cast any elemental magic, whether water, fire, wind, or earth. Astrid decided on fire, happily admitting to herself that she had a strong preference for the element of fire. Once she finished, Senjin told her to take a look at the newly created magic talisman. He asked if it was complete, and she confidently confirmed that it was. The talisman now displayed a distinct runic symbol and dark wavy patterns representing her fire magic. Senjin suggested they test it by having her hold the talisman and pour her magic power into it. She hesitated, trying to grasp the concept of what it meant to pour magic power. He gently explained that she should imagine lightly pouring a liquid from her heart without needing to strain herself. Astrid closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation of pouring a liquid from deep within her heart. The talisman began to react, releasing a faint glow as her magic flowed into it. Suddenly, a burst of fire erupted from the paper, manifesting her magic perfectly. Astrid was absolutely thrilled, realizing just how incredibly convenient magic talismans were. Sensen then explained that magic talismans could actually be activated even without holding them in one's hand. He instructed her to place the talisman far away, so she ran off to set it down and returned out of breath. He then told her to pour her magic power just like before, but this time imagining sending it to that distant spot. Focusing her mind, she successfully triggered the distant talisman, causing it to burst into flames. Senjin praised her excellent performance, noting that she only needed to increase her speed of pouring magic to make it perfect. Eager to experiment further, Astrid approached her tutor with a new idea in mind. She asked Senz if she could borrow another talisman to test something out, and he readily agreed. Holding the blank paper, she closed her eyes to focus her thoughts. She decided to incorporate the vivid image of an explosion into the talisman. After placing it on the ground, she prepared for the next step of her experiment. With a mischievous grin, she silently called upon Gnome to help her with the final touch. The Earth Spirit immediately manifests before her, startling her with his sudden appearance. She quickly explains her request, asking him to craft a cylindrical lead container and stuff it with her rolled-up magic talismans. With an understanding nod, he channels his magical power to construct the requested object. Moments later, the spirit presents the completed item to Astrid, who happily thanks him. She is absolutely thrilled to have successfully created a slug round packed with explosion magic tags instead of gunpowder. Astrid marvels at this world's very first firearm ammunition, a specialized slug round designed to fire a single projectile from a shotgun. When her tutor Senjin asks what the strange object is, Astrid innocently explains that it is a 12-gauge slug round used for hunting. However, she secretly adds with a wicked grin that she also intends to use it on humans. Having completed his task, bids them farewell and prepares to leave. Eager to test her new creation, Astrid loads the newly made slug round into her shotgun. When Senzen asks how she plans to use it, she prepares to demonstrate. She confidently pumps the shotgun with a sharp click. Astrid aims the weapon toward the sky, declaring that this is how it is used. She carefully inserts the shell into the chamber of the shotgun. Her tutor Senchen inquires about its usage and she begins to show him. With a swift motion, she chambers the round. She points the gun upward, ready to fire. The sudden powerful recoil of the gunshot shocks Senjin, while Astrid winces from the heavy impact on her arm and shoulder. The sheer force of the blast pushes her back, leaving her struggling to maintain her stance. Despite the pain, Astrid celebrates her successful test, realizing she can efficiently generate massive firepower with minimal magic, though she must now figure out how to handle the severe recoil. Rubbing her sore shoulder, she admits to her tutor that she still cannot fully control her magical power. The young man praises her anyway, deeply impressed by the incredible power of her previous spell. Thrilled by his compliments, she eagerly begs him to teach her blood magic next. While Wolf acknowledged it was his specialty, he cautioned her about the inherent risks. She confidently declared that mastering blood magic would allow her to suppress a gun's recoil. Amused by her enthusiasm, Wolf agreed to begin teaching her the fundamentals. However, she suddenly paused, questioning if her ultimate goal was really just to shoot guns. Wolf suggested starting with simple physical enhancement, explaining that it relied on the power of imagination. To demonstrate, he bent down and picked up a small stone from the ground. He warned her not to imagine anything impossible, as forcing the body would cause a backlash. She listened intently, carefully noting the danger of pushing her physical limits too far. He instructed her to visualize magic circulating through her body to fill her hands with strength. He explained that this followed the same principle as creating magic tags, but using her own flesh. With a sudden display of strength, Wolf effortlessly crushed the stone in his hand. Astrid stared in absolute awe, completely amazed by the incredible demonstration. When he asked if she wanted to try, she eagerly agreed without hesitation. She gleefully realized that this magic could easily grant her the strength of an elite athlete. Nearby, a pair of horses galloped freely across the open field. Wolf suggested she try strengthening her legs first, as running faster would make the magic's effects obvious. She gasped in wonder as she felt a surge of magical power filling her lower body. When Wolf asked if she was ready, she confidently declared that she was fully prepared. She secretly boasted that she could easily win an Olympic gold medal in her current state. Pointing toward a distant fence, he instructed her to run normally to test her enhanced abilities. He strictly warned her again to only imagine things within the realistic limits of human capability. With a wave of his hand, he gave her the signal to start her run. She immediately leaps forward, accelerating with incredible explosive speed. A gasp escapes her lips as she realizes just how fast she is moving. Her body feels weightless, as if she is effortlessly floating through the air. She notices the distant fence is suddenly right in front of her and calls out to her tutor. Her feet hit the ground, but she cannot stop her momentum. She ends up sliding roughly across the grass. Her tutor rushes over in a panic to ask if she is unharmed. She assures him she is completely fine, but he insists on examining her anyway. He carefully checks her physical condition and magical flow. He sighs, realizing he should have expected her to unleash such extraordinary power. She wonders to herself if she did something wrong. He is relieved to find that both her body and internal magic are perfectly normal. However, he warns her to be careful, as blood magic can be highly dangerous. She looks down and apologizes for her recklessness. She quickly cheers up and asks if they can train her upper body next. He gently tells her they must wait until she can properly regulate her magic. She looks up at him with pleading, sparkly eyes, begging for a chance. He firmly refuses, warning her that failing to regulate her magic could tear her muscles. She is shocked that her cute smile failed to sway him. She sulks in frustration over her failed persuasion. He advises her to master magic regulation through elemental magic first, and she reluctantly agrees. Her tutor, Senjin, patiently explained the fundamentals of magic control while demonstrating with a small glass. He then applauded her progress as she successfully activated her hanging talismans. Senjin praised her. Notes that she had finally learned to regulate her magical power to some extent. This marked her very first step toward achieving her dream of modern weapon supremacy. He then proposed testing her upper limits to see how much magic she could safely handle, to which she eagerly agreed. To begin the test, her tutor prepared to monitor her body while instructing her to summon water spirits to create a massive water ball. As she began, he encouraged her to keep going and push her limits further. She concentrated deeply, easily forming a sphere of water in the air above them. The water ball grew larger and larger, far exceeding her tutor's expectations. He watched in utter disbelief as she casually asked if she could still keep going. She peeked at him, completely unfazed by the massive amount of magic she was channeling. High above the ranch, a colossal body of water now hovered like a second sky. Looking up at her massive creation, Astrid asked Wolf Sensei if she should continue expanding it. Though Wolf Sensei wanted to see her full potential, he quickly urged her to stop before she caused severe damage to the surrounding area. The enormous mass of water rippled gently over the vast fields of the ranch. Agreeing that they had gone far enough, Wolf Sensei told her to wrap things up, and she prepared to dispel the magic. With a simple gesture, she effortlessly dissolved the massive water sphere into nothingness. With the test complete, her tutor let out a sigh of relief while she stood by waiting for his evaluation. She eagerly asked him how much of her magical capacity was safe for her to use. Wolf Sensei admitted that he honestly did not know because he had never encountered anyone with such immense magical power, but assured her that using the amount she displayed today would be perfectly safe. He added that even that safe limit represented an extraordinary amount of magical power. Astrid then asked if this meant she had finally mastered the art of magic regulation. Her tutor gently corrected her, explaining that true magic regulation requires years of dedicated training. He mentioned that even he still trains daily, leaving her to realize how difficult mastering magic truly is. She happily thanked him for his guidance, hugging him in excitement. He smiled and assured her that since she could now regulate her power, she was perfectly ready to use basic magic safely. Armed with this newfound confidence, she eagerly approached her father to ask if she could practice magic at home. However, he flatly refused her request. She quickly protested, pointing out that her tutor, Wolf had already given her his full approval. Her father countered that she had been studying magic for less than a week and shouldn't use it unsupervised. He explained that he was only saying this out of worry for her, leaving her groaning in frustration. Looking down gloomily, she muttered to her father. Suddenly, she prostrated herself dramatically, begging to use magic to avoid bringing shame to the family and to strengthen ties with the imperial family. Despite her dramatic plea, her father remained firm, stating that rules were rules. Just then, her mother Louise entered the room and called out to her husband. Louise asked what they were doing, prompting Astrid to run over and complain that her father wouldn't let her practice magic despite Wolf's approval. Clinging to her mother's dress, the young girl looked up with teary eyes to gain her sympathy. While Louise reacted with surprise, her husband stammered nervously, caught off guard by her sudden appearance. He defensively insisted that he was only speaking for Astrid's own good. He argued that magic was too dangerous for a child to handle alone. But Louise countered that Wolf had already given his permission. She suggested that it wouldn't be dangerous if a servant supervised her, adding that they shouldn't hinder her growth, which earned her a silent thumbs up of gratitude from Astrid. Astrid grinned smugly, thrilled by her mother's perfect assist. Her father, however, asked Louise if she wasn't worried about something happening to their daughter. He stood with a skeptical expression, still hesitant to give in. Astrid quickly chimed in, assuring him that she would be perfectly fine and would only practice the absolute basics. Secretly, however, she plotted to load explosion magic into talismans for target practice. She passionately argued that magic regulation required daily training, begging him to let her practice. In her mind, she happily imagined herself firing a shotgun loaded with her custom magic cartridges. Finally, her father sighed and gave his permission. The family stood together in the room as her father prepared to set his conditions. He warned her not to neglect her etiquette and regular studies, mentioning that her tutor had complained she only thought about magic, to which Astrid enthusiastically promised to work hard. She raised her hand in a cheerful salute to show her commitment. Her father sternly added that she must not break anything in the house or put herself in danger, or else her magic training would be over. She quickly gave an enthusiastic salute, declaring that she understood his conditions perfectly. While her parents watched her in utter confusion, wondering what that strange gesture meant, she celebrated winning them over, ready to focus on recreating modern weaponry and blowing her tragic destiny to pieces. Wolf von Wrangel handed Astrid a book, recommending she read it to understand the basics of magic. As she opened it, she learned that magic was fueled by imagination, allowing one to adjust elements like water temperature and flame heat. However, she was disappointed to find no mention of how to create sticky flames, realizing that making flamethrowers or napalm wouldn't be easy. With that realization, she turned her attention to the final section of the book. There she read a warning that running out of magic power would severely deplete one's physical strength, potentially leading to death. This grim revelation left her visibly shaken as she contemplated the dangerous reality of magic. She reasoned that despite her high capacity, her magic was not infinite, meaning she had to manage it carefully for future conflicts. When she finished, Wolf was astonished by her speed, but she cheerfully thanked him and praised how easy his book was to understand. He warmly praised her intelligence and expressed high hopes for her future, which she modestly brushed off. After their brief exchange, they settled back down at the table to begin the actual lesson. Wolf then introduced the topic of magic talismans, which she correctly identified as tools that activate spells instantly without needing imagination. To illustrate their utility, she envisioned a chaotic battlefield where soldiers charged forward in a brutal war. In this mental scenario, a dark-skinned mage urged her hesitant companion to fight back using magic as the enemy closed in. Before the young witch could prepare a spell, she was suddenly struck down by the oncoming assault. Seeing her ally fall, the dark-skinned mage declared that such a desperate moment was exactly when a magic talisman was needed. She immediately unleashed the talisman, triggering a massive fiery explosion that wiped out the approaching forces. Back in reality, Wolf explained that while talismans allow instant casting, they are single-use items that burn up upon activation. This led Astrid to imagine a pre-battle scenario where mages worked like factory lines, with seniors demanding juniors mass-produce talismans. Amused by the concept, Wolf suggested they actually try making one, transitioning their lesson to the Oldenburg Ranch. Astrid Sophie von Oldenburg was absolutely thrilled, blushing with joy as she celebrated having successfully crafted her new creation. She proudly presented her brand new 9mm automatic pistol, declaring that her true happiness had finally arrived. Holding the firearm sideways, Astrid playfully acknowledged that while it reduced her accuracy, the style was far too cool to resist as she aimed to physically shoot through anyone's heart. She then walked out to a grassy field to test her new weapon against a row of straw scarecrows. Raising the handgun, she took careful aim at the target directly in front of her. With a sharp crack, she pulled the trigger and fired a shot straight ahead. The bullet cleanly pierced the scarecrow's head, sending straw flying into the air. She cheered in excitement over her incredible accuracy, delighted that her blood magic had successfully suppressed the gun's heavy recoil. Although she had faced numerous design challenges with the cartridges and magazine, she reflected on how adjusting her magic flow resolved them, feeling deeply grateful for Wolf's lessons. Eager for more, she excitedly prepared to unleash a rapid-fire test of her new weapon. She began shooting repeatedly, moving dynamically as she fired shot after shot. The straw target was completely shredded under the relentless barrage of gunfire. The automatic pistol functioned flawlessly, ejecting spent casings with every pull of the trigger. Dozens of empty brass shells rained down into the grass around her feet. She stared at the empty weapon in brief surprise. Looking down at the empty casings, she realized she had already spent all the bullets she stayed up all night crafting, wishing she had made more but thoroughly satisfied with the fun she had. Deciding that the pistol would serve perfectly as her sidearm, she began contemplating what kind of main weapon she should create next. She quickly decided that this next weapon of choice had to be an automatic rifle. She recalled seeing one completely disassembled during a visit to a shooting range in Guam in her past life. Armed with that memory, she called upon Gnome to aid her once more. Suddenly, a fully formed automatic rifle materialized right in front of her. She cheered in absolute delight, boasting that her incredible firepower knew no bounds. However, her celebration was interrupted when Gnome called out to get her attention. She turned around to see the small earth spirit standing nearby on the grass. Greeting him warmly, she asked if he had adjusted the weapon, and he confirmed it should work perfectly. She happily thought about how kind and adorable the tiny spirit was. But Gnome then questioned her intentions, asking if she planned to start a war with such a weapon. Astrid quickly reassured him that she was not trying to cause a conflict between nations. Instead, she explained that it was a war on a purely personal level. She declared with confidence that she was preparing to fight against her own tragic destiny. Although Gnome found it hard to comprehend, she admitted that the situation was incomprehensible to anyone. She reflected on how absurd it was to suddenly wake up as a villainess in an Otome game. Gnome stated that while he enjoyed creating machinery, he drew the line at making tools for murder. He sternly warned her to keep the weapon to herself and never let anyone else analyze it. She listened intently, taken aback by the gravity of his words. He explained that the balance of power kept nations from war, but such a weapon would tempt kings to violence. Realizing the depth of his concern, she promised to keep this technology a complete secret. Relieved by her vow, Gnome bid farewell to the girl who created such bizarre machines. She proudly introduced herself as Astrid, determined to ensure this power remained hers alone. Landing perfectly on her feet, she successfully boosts her physical abilities to become a superpowered young girl. Seeing her flawless landing, Wolf-sensei applauds her excellent performance. Afterwards, as they sit together, Astrid asks Wolf-sensei if blood magic has other effects, like healing or mind control. She explains that out of all those possibilities, she especially wants to master reflex enhancement. She imagines a battle-weary swordsman crying about killing, while a witch asks their senior what to do about his depression. Their dark-skinned senior confidently tells them to leave the matter to her. She then reaches out and places her hand on the depressed swordsman's forehead. The swordsman instantly freezes in place as her magic takes effect. His eyes quickly glaze over into a completely hypnotized state. Satisfied that his mental state is restored, the witch and their senior cheer him on. Now brainwashed and smiling maniacally, the swordsman eagerly vows to go slaughter all of their enemies. Astrid realizes that this mind-altering magic is actually used for PTSD prevention, keeping soldiers composed during endless battles. In her thoughts, the two women watch the brainwashed warrior charge back into the fray. Back in reality, Wolf-sensei explains that such advanced magic is only taught in high school, but Astrid begs him to teach her anyway. Knowing she will not back down once she has made up her mind, he reluctantly agrees. He explains that learning this magic will allow her to instantly detect any physical strain caused by her spells. As he prepares to teach her how to monitor her body, Astrid marvels at how advanced this world's magic is before he tells her to relax her breathing. She takes a deep breath, and he instructs her to circulate her magic power throughout her entire body. Following his guidance, she successfully completes the circulation and happily announces her success. Her tutor then tells her to check the flow for any abnormalities. Closing her eyes, reassures that everything feels completely normal, yet she continues to ponder quietly as she focuses even deeper. Seeing her focus, her tutor advised her to maintain the flow, while directing her attention to her limbs, organs, and brain to see if she could feel them functioning. As she concentrated, vivid mental images of her own heart, brain, and digestive system flashed in her mind. Astrid excitedly exclaimed that she could clearly perceive the inner workings of her entire body. Pleased with her progress, Wolf-sensei offered to teach her how to use this awareness to enhance her reflexes. He instructed her to focus on the signals constantly traveling through her body and try to accelerate them. Astrid realized this meant speeding up her neural transmissions, which would indeed boost her reaction time when she suddenly sensed a rapid movement nearby. Her eyes snapped open as she locked onto a target moving at extreme speed. With her newly enhanced reflexes, she easily snatched a fast-flying dragonfly right out of the air with her bare hands. After gently releasing the insect, she asked Wolf-sensei if manipulating the brain itself was difficult, and he explained that the brain remained largely a mystery. He warned her that because of those unknown elements, tampering with the brain could have completely unpredictable consequences. Eager to learn more, Astrid begged her tutor to bring her more books on blood magic for their next lesson. He readily agreed, promising to bring a slightly more advanced text next time. However, he strictly cautioned her to only practice basic limb reinforcement at home and avoid experimenting with anything else. Astrid cheerfully agreed, secretly delighted that she could now handle her shotgun's heavy recoil and looking forward to an evening of target practice. The young villainess Astrid Sophie von Oldenburg is so dangerously unpredictable that one simply cannot take their eyes off her. She and her maid set up scarecrows in a field to prepare for a secret target practice session. Excitedly, Astrid announces that they will be test-firing a shotgun and an automatic rifle today. She giggles as she reveals that she even prepared an optical sight to attach to her weapon later. Watching her handle the heavy weaponry, the worried maid calls out to her young mistress. She nervously asks if such dangerous devices are truly safe to use. Astrid reassures her with a smile, claiming that the weapon is perfectly safe. She adds that it remains safe as long as the muzzle muzzle is never pointed at oneself or an ally. Ready to begin, the young girl prepares to cast her physical enhancement magic. She takes aim at the scarecrow while her maid watches anxiously from a safe distance. With a loud bang, she fires a single shot that cleanly pierces the target. Pleased with the result, Astrid decides to boost her physical strength even further. She challenges herself to see how well her 4-year-old body can withstand the recoil of full auto fire. The maid covers her ears in terror as a barrage of bullets shreds the scarecrow to pieces. While her maid screams, Astrid is absolutely thrilled by the exhilarating rush of the automatic gunfire. She happily walks away from the smoking targets, leaving spent shell casings scattered on the grass. Looking back, the scarecrow target in the field shows a perfect bullseye from her intense practice. She boasts that her physical reinforcement magic was what allowed her to easily suppress the heavy recoil. Celebrating a perfect score of 20 out of 20 hits, she praises both her blood magic and her wonderful new weapon. Then she happily cuddled her rifle, completely satisfied with its performance. Suddenly, her maid rushed over in a panic, asking if she was unhurt after hearing the gunfire. The young lady apologized for startling her maid and eagerly declared that she would test the shotgun next. Reassuring her maid that she was perfectly fine, she asked her to stay just a bit longer before heading home, noting that even non-lethal rubber bullets could be fatal. With that, she sat on the grass to load her shotgun while the maid watched with concern. As she prepared the weapon, she pondered where she should aim her next shot. Suddenly, something caught her attention in the distance. A group of men riding a carriage spotted her from afar and wondered if she was some noble lady. As one of the men pointed her out, Onal-sama took offense to their questioning tone, asserting that she was indeed a proper duke's daughter. Meanwhile, the rough-looking men smirked as they approached her. Seeing them close in, the maid gasped in horror, recognizing the men as the notorious livestock thieves who had been raiding the duke's ranch. Because of the danger, she urged the young lady to flee immediately. She reassured her worried maid that she would handle the situation herself. The bandit leader smirked at her bravery, mockingly asking if the weapon in her hands was just some noble's toy. In response, she demanded that they stop stealing her family's livestock, which only amused the bandit leader. The bandit leader then realized that if she claimed the ranch, she must be the duke's daughter. She proudly confirmed her identity as Astrid Sophie von Oldenburg, declaring herself the protector of the livestock. Hearing this, the bandit leader grinned, realizing that kidnapping a duke's daughter would fetch a far greater ransom than merely stealing livestock. One of the thugs threatened her, warning that she would get hurt if she resisted. He ordered her to come with him, but Astrid merely snorted in contempt. Instead of backing down, Astrid glared back fiercely, warning the bandits that they were the ones who would suffer if they did not retreat. The scarred bandit leader ordered Astrid Sophie von Oldenburg to come over to him. He sneered at her, declaring his plan to kidnap her and squeeze a massive ransom from the duke's household, completely unaware of how dangerous this young girl truly was. With a wicked grin, the man reached out his hand to grab her, but Astrid was not intimidated at all, boldly declaring that she would take them all on. She then summoned her shotgun, ready to unleash its devastating power. Before the leader could even react, a sudden blast struck him and sent him flying back with a painful groan. His comrades cried out in utter shock and anger as they watched their leader get taken down in an instant. Enraged, the remaining bandits quickly surrounded the young girl with their weapons drawn. Astrid merely snorted in response to their aggressive stance. She immediately activated her magic to accelerate her neural transmissions, sharpening her reflexes to the absolute limit. As a mustache-wearing bandit lunged forward, she calmly prepared to make her move. The man swung his blade, but her enhanced speed allowed her to easily slip past his strike. She swiftly ducked under his attack and slid right behind him. The bandit turned around in confusion, completely losing track of her movements. By the time he realized where she was, she already had her shotgun aimed directly at his back. With a smirk, she fired her weapon, cheerfully marking him as her second target down. Seeing his ally fall, a massive bald bandit swung his sword down in a furious rage, swearing to show her no mercy. Astrid calmly pointed out that killing her would ruin their chance at a ransom. Right before blasting him point blank, she pulled the trigger, unleashing another powerful shot from her weapon. The force of the blast sent the giant bandit flying backward through the air. He crashed heavily onto the ground, completely incapacitated. The last remaining bandit, a long-haired man, cursed in frustration as he realized he was now all alone. Astrid casually rested her shotgun on her shoulder and asked if he wanted to keep fighting or just surrender quietly. Enraged by her calm demeanor, the bandit refused to give up and lunged at her with a fierce kick. She stood her ground, completely unfazed by his desperate assault. With a deafening blast, she fired a shot that sent him flying backward in shock. Looking at the fallen foe, she offered a quick prayer, wondering if the impact had accidentally changed his gender. Seeing this terrifying display, the remaining bandits fled in absolute panic, screaming that she was a monster. As they ran, another bandit tried to leap at Astrid from behind with a knife. However, she easily dodged and cheerfully remarked that abandoning comrades was not very admirable. With a bright smile, she fired her shotgun point blank at the foolish attacker. The powerful blast instantly blew the tiny bandit away into the distance. A triumphant announcement declared that Astrid had successfully defeated the entire pack of livestock thieves. Astrid then happily ordered her maid to use the bandits' own carriage for a grand grand return to the mansion. Upon their arrival, Erhard von Eschenbach, a knight of the Oldenburg family, was introduced. He was utterly shocked to hear that the young lady had captured livestock thieves, just as Astrid cheerfully announced her return. When the stunned knight asked if she truly did this, Astrid proudly claimed it was all thanks to her magic. Erhard could only stare at her in complete speechless disbelief. He marveled at the fact that she had managed to take down 5 fully armed men all by herself. Deeply impressed, the knight expressed his utmost admiration for her incredible growth and magical prowess. But as they spoke, a dark, menacing silhouette loomed directly behind the young girl. Astrid smugly boasted that her magic was quite special, completely unaware of her angry father, Ofusama, calling her name. Her father, Ofupsama, immediately began scolding her, declaring that her constant late arrivals had led to this and strictly enforcing a new curfew. Astrid wept over the sudden end of her rose-colored shooting life, while her father pointed out the danger of facing armed men. He then knelt down to gently check on his daughter. When he asked if she had been scared, Astrid cheerfully admitted she was too absorbed in the fight, leaving him to sigh that her future husband would have a difficult time. Ultimately, the narrator noted that it was far too early for her father to be worrying about such things.